Rev up your engines! Okay, what is this? Looks like a Toyota 4Runner, but no, this is a Japanese vehicle. The first clue is the steering wheel's on the wrong side for us. Realize that the Japanese drive on the wrong side of the road like the English. They drive on the left side of the road, so they have to have the steering wheel on the right side so they can see when they pass people. Just like we drive on the right side of the road, so we need the steering wheel on the left so we can see if anybody's coming when we're going to pass on a small road. And the name gives it away. Toyota Hilux Surf. The Hilux is a regular pickup truck. This is just like a 4Runner. It's an SUV. This isn't a camper. It's a full-size body, as you can see in the back seat here. He's got them folded down so he can carry stuff. It's an SUV. And since this is an older one, 1993, you can tell. It looks pretty much like a pickup truck that's had a back put onto it. This isn't a pickup truck with a camper. This is all solid body. So basically, this is the Japanese version of a 4Runner. And you can see, like a truck though, it's got the spare tire on the back. But like an SUV, you turn the key, down goes the window. But like a pickup truck, it's got sort of a tailgate on it. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Of course, since this was imported from Japan, everything's in Japanese. Now, other than North America, the rest of the world generally calls Toyota pickups Toyota Hilux. Not the Hilux Surf, which is the SUV version. The regular Hiluxes are just like a Tacoma pickup. A lot of the stuff is very similar. But this is a Toyota Hilux Surf from Japan, and it's got something different than you're going to see in the United States. And it's under the hood. This baby has an electronic fuel injection diesel turbo engine. They sure made the turbo easy to get to. Here it is right there. It's not an engine that was available in the United States. The rest of the world loves it. Now, one of those reasons is the rest of the world, people drive a lot of standard transmissions. I just talked to a guy from Germany. He said 90-something% of the people, when he lived there, drove standard transmissions. But here in the United States, 96% of the people now drive automatics. The downfall of this particular vehicle is it does have an automatic transmission. And it also has four-wheel drive. Now this particular one weighs 4,200 pounds. And with a slow diesel engine and an automatic transmission, even with a turbo, it's a pretty slow vehicle. I'm going to show you. It's a Toyota, so we know it's going to start right up. We turn the key on. We see the glow plug indicator went off. Now these things are so slow, I'm going to put it on ECT power, so at least the transmission will shift later and we'll have a little more power. But being a diesel, we'll put it in gear. Put it in gear, you don't notice any difference. It doesn't particularly shake more. It's not shaking bad. For an old car, 1993, it runs good, but it has no pickup, even with a turbocharger. Here we are going up a hill. That's floored. These are highly dependable engines. They can run forever, but they're slow. Slow as molasses going uphill in January sometimes. Now, since these old ones are pretty much trucks turned into SUVs, they run perfectly fine. You know, they ride a little bit rough, but trucks ride a little bit rough. It's basically a smallish pickup truck. You can hear the turbo spooling on and off and see the turbo light come on. It's not like it's not working, it's working. It's just that they don't have that much acceleration. It makes noise, but it takes a while to get going. And realize this is kilometers an hour because it's a Japanese car. That's not miles per hour. And if you look at it, it goes to 160 kilometers an hour. 160 kilometers an hour is 99 miles an hour. So the speedometer stops at 99 miles an hour. They claim that these things can do 115, but I wouldn't want to be the one driving it. Or I'd have to have an awful long runway. Just as the Hiluxes, the straight ones, a pickup truck, are excellent little trucks you're driving around in, these Hilux Surfs are excellent little SUVs, as long as you're not racing anybody or planning on doing any high-speed driving at all. We'll come to a stop here and do a full takeoff, and that's with power on. Here we go. You can see it doesn't really get out of its own way, even with the turbo on. They're not race cars. They get the cruising speeds, they're perfectly fine. That's the thing about diesel engines. They get phenomenal gas mileage, and they're perfectly fine for cruising. They're not made for drag racing. They're made for just cruising. This thing still cruises perfectly fine. But with four-wheel drive, all that weight, a heavy diesel engine that's like 2.8 liters, this thing barely gets out of its own way. That's why they never were sold in the United States. People don't like diesels anyways, but they're so slow, Americans wouldn't accept all the 4Runners that people are nuts about. They got V6 engines in them, and gasoline V6 engines. They put out a lot more horsepower. But as old as this thing, when we put it into 4-wheel drive, it may be slow, but it won't get stuck. You notice when I turn it off, it's got a bit more acceleration. It really slows these things down. Let's face it, you got one of these things in the Outback, and I got a friend in Australia that has one. You want dependability, good gas mileage, or in this case, diesel mileage. You don't really care about extreme acceleration. You got a lot of space and a lot of time. And these things will get you where you're going. It'll just take a while longer. And truth be told, if it didn't have the stupid automatic transmission, it would have a lot more acceleration and be a lot more fun to drive. Obviously, the original Japanese owner of this car, as it did come from Japan, it's a used car from Japan, didn't care much about acceleration. They just wanted something that would run forever, get them where they're going, and get phenomenal gas mileage for such a heavy vehicle. Remember, it weighs 4,200 pounds. But before you go out and buy one of these diesel weasels from Japan, you gotta put on your thinking cap. They never sold this engine in the United States. Getting parts for it can be a royal pain in the wazoo. You want this? It's kind of a backup for running errands, for doing stuff. Not your everyday driver, because if something breaks and you gotta wait weeks for parts, you're not gonna have a vehicle. Now, this particular engine needs a crankshaft position sensor. It's down there, it just bolts on and off. Not that hard to do. The owner's gonna have to find one, order it, bring it, then I can put it on. He can put it on himself too, it just bolts on and off. It's not rocket science. You're not gonna be able to just go buy one at the auto parts store. They don't have any record of these engines. But there's lots of clubs of these guys with the Hilux Surfs, sharing information where they can get parts. It becomes kind of a cult thing owning one of these. And wheels, brakes, all that stuff, it's just regular 4Runner stuff. Many of the parts are interchangeable with an American 4Runner or an American Tacoma. But truthfully, you want to have fun with one of these? Don't get an automatic. Get a standard transmission, you'll have a lot more fun. Because with the strain of air conditioning and the strain of 4-wheel drive, plus 4,200 pounds of weight unloaded with nothing in it, takes a strain on this little bitty automatic transmission. So if you have a 5-speed manual transmission, you got a lot more to play with. They're a lot more fun to drive. You can accelerate much better. It also weighs less than the automatic transmission. So it's a win-win in most situations. That's one of the reasons these things were never sold in the United States. They're so slow. Americans would not accept something like that. We don't like diesels anyways. But these things are just so slow, it makes no sense to get one with an automatic transmission unless you just want something to cruise around in and you don't care. And really, when you think about it, the speedometer tops out at 99 miles an hour, 160 kilometers an hour. And as old as this thing is, 1993, the engine still runs fine. Just a tad on the slow side. Realize that if you have the non-turbo version, some of those only put out 90 horsepower. They're not speed demons. They're reliable, dependable diesel engines. And if you're planning on doing any underwater trips, you can't beat a diesel with a snorkel. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Hell, kid said, my car shakes when I put it in drive. Well, there can be various reasons. It runs perfectly fine in park and neutral, but then you put it in drive and it starts shaking. First thing you want to do is check motor mounts. They're broken, that's what's going to happen. And the other thing is, if your transmission or the torque converter inside your transmission is worn, when you put it in drive, that strains the engine too much and makes it shake. And that's big money. You have to rebuild the transmission or at minimum pull it out of the car and replace the torque converter. Very expensive job. But of course, if it's running off even in park or neutral, you can have many things. You can have a vacuum leak. You might need spark plugs, air filter, fuel filter. Always do the simple things first. And if you end up finding that it's the tranny or torque converter, my old Celica's been doing that ever since I bought it because it's the torque converter that's worn, but it runs perfectly fine other way. So when I come to a stop, I put it in neutral. It doesn't shake at all. I've been doing that for like 8 years, so I don't care. I'm not going to tear it apart and put a torque converter because it works fine other way. It just strains it too much at an idle. If that's the case, you'd live with that. C. Garcia says, on my 2012 Honda Civic, my cooling fans don't turn on until I turn the AC on. I changed the relay switch, but it still won't turn on. I have to drive with the AC on for them to turn on. What can cause this? Understand it's a dual system. When you turn your AC on, that automatically turns the cooling fans on. When the AC isn't turned on, there's a separate system that turns your fan on when it reaches a certain temperature of the water, then it goes down. Replace temperature sensor. There's a temperature sensor that runs the cooling fans. That's it 99% of the time. Now, if that doesn't fix it, it is a Honda, and sometimes the main computers go bad and do that, then my advice is just run the AC all the time and the fans will run. Or you can put a toggle switch on the car, and then when you start it up, you can flip the toggle switch to turn them on. And then when you don't want them on, you can turn them off. So it's generally just that. But if it is the computer, my advice is, hey, run your AC all the time, man, because those computers cost a fortune. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.